Aloha class, I wanted to do a video on exercise 10-7 to help you understand how we're going to capitalize interest on a building or an asset we are constructing. And so the beginning of the chapter talked about how do you find the weighted average of accumulated expenditures. And so I think it starts with the concept of we're going to take out this loan specifically for construction, but in this problem it said we're estimating that $5 million, it's going to cost us around $5 million, I believe. And so, okay, this construction loan is only $2 million, and we project we're going to have to incur $5 million to make this building. So I have to kind of recruit other loans that I've taken out previously to help me with this construction of building this asset. And so I'm going to recruit some other loans that I have outstanding already. So there's a short-term loan, there's a long-term loan, and it's easy to calculate actual interest. Could we calculate actual interest? And so the problem, I think it kind of assumes that, or it tells you that this interest has been outstanding, or these loans have been used, or not been used. They've been in effect. They've already been taken out for the whole entire year. There's no partial bits of it. We took this construction loan out at the beginning of the year. We already had the short-term loan, incurring interest, and this long-term loan incurring interest. So would it be that hard to calculate actual interest that we're paying on all of these loans? If we use the money or not, we're still going to have to pay interest. So pretty easy calculation. I can just times them together and find the actual interest. Actual interest isn't too bad. Oops, sorry. Okay. Sum of this actual interest. So I paid $490,000 in interest, actual interest. But the book talks about how you're going to compute avoidable interest. And in order to compute avoidable interest, we have to see what items could we have, what amount of interest could we have avoided if we hadn't made expenditures for this building, right? So once we spend money on the building, that money spent is incurring interest for that building. This interest was incurred specifically for building this building, right? And we don't make expenditures one big $2 million expenditure usually at the beginning of a project. It happens throughout the year. And so that's where the calculations, I know in a previous problem where, we made this amount of expenditures and we made it in January 1st. So 12 out of 12 months was this expenditure for the building incurring interest for 12 out of 12 months, and this whole amount of the money was incurring interest specifically for this building. If I wasn't making this building, I wouldn't have had to spend this interest. It was all because of this building. And then maybe in March 1st, I had another expenditure specifically for this building, building this building, and it was in March. So, okay, March 1st. So January and February had already passed. So it's incurring interest for March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. For 10 months, 10 out of 12 months out of the year is this money incurring interest because I spent it on trying to build this, building. And so we're going to try to find that weighted average of how much the expenditures were and when we spent that, and how much interest is the amount of time that it can accumulate interest or incur interest. And so this weighted average of accumulated expenditures takes into effect the amount of time that interest can incur from the expenditures we've made specifically to build this building. Hopefully that kind of helped you a little bit, but they've already calculated this, right? When we've done those problems where there's the expenditure, this is the time period, the weighted time period, specific number of months, times those together and sum them up. So they've already done this for us, and that's this number. So now we want to try the avoidable interest. And so we know that we have this construction loan that was specifically for building this asset, and it was $2 million. So I'm okay with using, I know I first started paying for these expenditures using this loan specifically for construction. This is why I brought out the loan, and this is the interest rate I'm going to use that at. So of my 3.6 million expenditures, 2 million of that was used for my construction loan, and so I should use a 12% rate. But there's a little bit more. I paid more expenditures, and I must have used a different loan. And I know I'm going to use these loans, what's left over. These are the only loans I have left over to use for my construction. So I know I use these two loans. But what rate should I use? Should I use the 10% rate because the short term came first, or should I use the 11% rate because the 11% came second? You know, what's the logic behind should I use the 10% or the 11%? And so the suggestion is that you should always use a weighted average if the construction loan isn't enough to pay for your expenditures. I didn't take a loan out big enough to pay for my expenditures that happened throughout the year. And so this excess of 1.6 million has to come out of a weighted average from the leftover loans that are paying for this expenditure. So we're going to do a weighted average to find which interest, or a weighted average interest rate. And so 1.4 million was at 10% and 1 million was at 11%. So if I were to think about what this weighted average is going to look like, I don't think it's going to be right in the middle because there's more loans at 1.4 million. So it's not going to be 10.5, it's going to be less than 10.5 because it's weighted, and this has more weight than this loan. And so we can sum these up together, find the interest of both of them. So $250,000 interest divided by, we're going to divide that by the total amount of loans outstanding to find a weighted average. So hopefully you got that formula. First we times them together to get a total amount of interest incurred by just these two leftover loans, and then we divided by the total amount of loans, the short-term and the long-term loans. So 250 divided by 2.4 million there, and you can see that formula. So my weighted average, and they say to round to 2 decimal places. So 10.42% is my weighted average. 10.42% is the weighted average of these leftover loans, because I know I took this one loan out specifically for this construction, and then I'm going to weight all the other loans so I can have an average percentage that I can use over here. And so let's do this percentage. I found my weighted average. I'm going to times my 12% times it by the 2 million, and the 10.42% times it by the 1.6 million. And this is going to give me my avoidable interest here. And so could we get a sum of these two, avoidable interest? Comma this. And so if I were to take out these loans, the amount that I could have avoided was 662. Oh, let me do 0.1042. Make sure, sorry, it's a rounding error there. Make sure it's 10.42% and not more. With more decimal places, it'll throw off your numbers. So my avoidable interest is this amount, 406,720. And so remember, we're always going to take the lesser of the avoidable interest or the actual interest. And over here, my avoidable interest is the lesser, and that's what I'm going to use to capitalize, to add to the value of my asset on my balance sheet.